The bench was already there when he lowered himself down. The wood cooled through the fabric, his weight settling in the same place it always did. He shifted once, then again. His hands rested on his knees. They stayed there. They always did. The bench held the faint mark of that habit, a darker strip where his body met it, a place worn smooth by evenings that arrived the same way. He sat. He waited. The light was neither bright nor gone. It hovered. The bench caught it along one edge, then lost it as the angle changed. He leaned forward slightly, then straightened, as if correcting something only he noticed. Nothing around him moved with purpose. Neither did he. Every evening ended like this. The return was quiet. The bench did not need to be found. It was already known. His feet stopped in front of it without pause, without looking. The same spot, the same distance from the edge. He brushed his palm across the surface once, slow, feeling the shallow grain. Again, then his hand went back to his knee. The bench stayed still. It did not offer comfort. It did not refuse it. Time passed in small pieces. A breath lengthened. Another followed. He adjusted the way he sat, just enough to release pressure, then froze again in that corrected position. Waiting had its own posture. Sometimes his shoulders rose, as if something were about to happen. They always settled back down. The bench had been painted once. The paint had thinned. The edges were softer now. The middle was worn down to what was underneath. That was where he sat. He looked ahead without fixing on anything. The space in front of him remained empty, but not unused. It held the possibility of movement. It always had. He checked nothing. He reached for nothing. The bench asked for nothing in return. His foot tapped once, then stopped, as if reminded of the rule. Waiting required stillness. The evening stayed open. The bench stayed beneath him, and he stayed where he was, certain only of this part, as though something might still arrive and recognize him sitting there. He came back to the bench the same way each time. The approach never changed. His steps slowed before reaching it, not out of caution, but out of recognition. The body remembered before the mind did. He sat. He waited. The habit shaped the evening. His hands found his knees. His back found the angle that let him stay without effort. If he leaned too far forward, he corrected it. If he leaned back, he adjusted again. The bench received every small correction without response. Time moved around him instead of through him. The light thinned, then it thickened briefly, as if reconsidering. The bench held its color until it didn't. Some evenings, he counted nothing but breaths. Not on purpose. The count happened on its own and then dissolved. Other evenings, he marked the passing by pressure shifting from one hip to the other. The bench knew those shifts well. His foot sometimes traced the same small arc on the ground. Once, twice, then still. The bench had learned his weight. It dipped slightly where he sat. Not enough to be seen, enough to be felt. He remained until the air changed. That change was subtle. It arrived without signal. He recognized it anyway. Waiting stretched itself thin and wide at the same time. Minutes passed without shape. They did not stack neatly. They spread. He checked the space ahead again. The empty stretch held. Nothing crossed it. Nothing interrupted it. The bench cooled further as the evening continued. The wood no longer held warmth. He noticed. He did not move away. Sometimes his hands clasped together for a moment, then separated, returning to their places. Sometimes his fingers pressed into the grain, then released. The habit did not comfort him. It did not distress him either. It simply continued. When the light finally thinned past a certain point, he shifted once more, the same way he always did. Not to leave, just to stay longer. There had been a time when the bench was not enough on its own. It had shared the weight of something unfinished. He sat there now, the same way, but the memory pressed differently. Not as an image, not as a clear moment, more like a pull that never reached its target. The bench had once held more than stillness. A pause that expected an answer. A pause that stayed open too long. He remembered arriving early. Not early by minutes, but by intention. The bench had been empty then, untouched, its surface unmarked by his shape. He had brushed the wood the same way, testing the grain, as if the bench could confirm what the evening was meant to become. He sat straight at that time. His shoulders did not sink. The space in front of him had felt different, occupied by something not yet present, but already imagined. Waiting had been sharper then. It had edges. The bench held the echo of that posture. Even now, when he settled into the worn middle, the wood remembered the earlier weight, the tension that once stayed in his spine. There were sounds he no longer listened for, not because they were gone, but because they had failed once. He had learned not to lean toward them. The evening had stretched before him back then, too, but it had promised movement, a shift, a reason for sitting so still. The bench had not changed when that promise thinned. It had remained where it was. Only the waiting had altered its shape. He did not replay the moment clearly. There was no scene to return to, only a sense of stopping just short of something. Of staying seated when standing might have mattered. Now, when he waited, that earlier stillness hovered nearby, not as regret, not as choice, just as something unfinished that never asked to be completed. His hands pressed into his knees a little harder than before, then relaxed. The bench did not respond. It never had. The light shifted again, thinner now, less patient. He remained seated, carrying the quiet weight of that earlier waiting, as if the bench still remembered a version of him who had expected more from the evening. The evening reached the point where nothing new usually happened. He felt it before he named it. The bench had cooled completely now. It would no longer adjust it to him. It simply existed beneath his weight, firm and unchanged. He shifted once, not out of restlessness, out of acknowledgement. The space in front of him stayed open. It always would. He no longer leaned into it the way he once had. His gaze rested there lightly, without expectation pressing forward. Waiting softened when it lost its edge. It became something closer to staying. His hands slid from his knees and rested beside him on the bench. For a moment, his fingers curled around the edge. Then they loosened. The habit had changed without announcing itself. He still came back. He still sat. But the evening no longer felt like a question asking to be answered. The bench held him the same way regardless. The worn middle accepted his weight. The grain pressed faintly into his palms. He breathed. Once. Again. There was no signal telling him to leave. There never was. Leaving had always been part of the waiting, folded quietly into it. He straightened, slower than before. Not as preparation, just as a final adjustment. The space ahead remained empty, but it no longer pulled at him. It simply stayed open, the way the evening stayed open without urgency. He placed his palm on the bench one last time, not to feel for anything specific, just to mark the moment. Then he stood. The bench stayed where it was. It always would. He stepped away without looking back, carrying the shape of the habit with him, lighter now, as if some part of the waiting had been set down and left behind, while the rest remained quietly on the bench. There are things no one says out loud. Not because there is nothing to say, but because saying it might change everything. If this story feels familiar, perhaps you understand it better than most.